So, our main topic this week is working with standards. A lot of schools are going to standards-based grading or have been doing it for a very long time at different grade levels. And of course, we had our big transition in PowerSchool 9.0 to the architecture we have today for standards and how they interact with PowerTeacher Pro and the gradebook and everything else. So I thought I would just run through just some basic organizing principles within PowerSchool and ways that you can easily adjust or change those standards. So let's take a look. Now, of course, we'll find the standard setup within District Office, and then going to District Setup, and then down in the grading area, there we go. Down in the grading area, we have our standards. So again, most of you that are working with standards are fairly familiar with them, but let's kind of run through the menu here. The first thing you'll see are conversion scales, and hopefully by now everyone understands that these standard conversion scales only apply to the PowerTeacher gradebook and not to PowerTeacher Pro. So if you're a relatively new user of PowerSchool, or you're a new customer and you don't use PowerTeacher gradebook at all, you'll need to have at least one conversion scale set up simply so you can assign it to your standards. It could be anything you want because it's never going to get used, but you would have to have at least one. Everything else that's in here would have been converted to a standard grade scale when you first upgraded to PowerSchool 9.0 2 years ago. So if we go back to the standards menu and back to district setup and then grade scales, of course, for PowerTeacher Pro, grade scales play a really critical role in standards-based grading and working with your standards, because for each standard, you need to assign it a conversion scale, which again would only be used by PowerTeacher Gradebook if you're still using it, and then the grade scale that you want to use within PowerTeacher Pro. So if you were doing a 1 through 4 type of grading scale, you'd want to create a 1 through 4 numeric scale. Of course, numerics are new, or were new, with PowerSchool 9.0 as well. So we're just going to create a numeric 1 through 4. We can say if that's going to be used for both standards, traditional, or traditional grades and standards, both. This has a new benefit that we didn't have in the PowerTeacher Gradebook days, where the course grade scale and your standard grade scale can be one and the same. So if you were in a situation where you wanted all of your standards to roll up into a final grade calculation for the course overall, saying that you want your traditional grade to be based on standards, one of the best ways to do that, if you can, is to have them using the same grade scale. Now, I know a lot of schools want to take that 1 through 4 and average it together and turn it into an A, B, C, D. So, of course, that would have to go to an alphanumeric scale, and you'd have to go through a percent conversion from the 1 through 4 scale to the A, B, C, D, F scale. But you do have the ability now, if you wanted to say, yep, this is going to be used for both traditional grading and for standards-based grading, and you could use it for everything. One thing to be aware of that will affect your standards and standards-based grading is when you put in your range, so we're going to say from 1 to 4, you can decide if you want grades in between. So with only 1 through 4, our grades that are possible are literally 1, 2, 3, or 4. And sometimes people would like to have a little more variability. So you could say, well, maybe we'll offer a 0.5. So you'll have a 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. The example gives you an idea of what that grade scale would look like. But if you choose standards only, then you get an additional option where instead of being forced to choose 1/2, 1/4, 1/3, or plus minus, you can actually say decimals and then choose up to 3 decimal places. So if you want possible to have every number between 1 and 4 down to 2 decimal places, then you can say standards only and decimals. But if you have traditional or standards and traditional, that option goes away and you have to round it to at least 1/3. If you're going to have values, that is, between 1 and 4. So I'm just going to say none for this example. We only need 4 color bands because we only have 4 values. We'll generate the table, and now we have our 1 through 4 grade scale already created for us. So that's how we create a grade scale. And then as we go back to our standards, If we wanted to assign that to a standard, we would go into List Standards. Really important to remember that you have the search filter here. So if I know, for example, I want my senior language art standards, and I know they all start with SLA dot something, I can take the time to start drilling down, and then there's SLA, and now I can see them all. But what if I had a lot of standards? I could have just come up here and said SLA dot, and that would go ahead and just filter right to those standards. So don't forget you've got the filter here that can make it easier to find what you're looking for. When we click into the standard, that's where we'll find the standard name, the identifier that has to be unique, its parent, so the system understands what level it's at. So SLA.1 reports up to SLA. SLA reports up to Apple Grove standards. So there would be level 1, level 2, and level 3. You have an optional description, the list of courses, and then here's where we get to that grading information. And we would choose our grade scale that we like to use on the standard, whether that's our new numeric 1 through 4 or any of the others that you see listed here. And I'm not sure why my numeric 1 through 4 isn't showing up. I think maybe I forgot to name it. So we would go ahead and make that change. Now, one of the things I wanted to show to you today is what if you wanted to change that for all of these standards or a much larger group of standards? One of the lesser known tools that you have at your disposal for doing that is the Data Export Manager. That might not be obvious at first, but it has the ability to both view, export, and mass change standards data and standards setup. So let's take a look at that. Let's say, for example, we did want to change all of our senior language arts standards to a different grade scale, to that numeric 1 through 4. So let's go back to our grade scale list. And I'm going to sort by ID, so that is the most recent. I'm not sure what happened with my name there. But let's put that back so it's clear. There we go. Now, one of the things that we have in the table is the ID of that grade scale. So the DCID is the important piece. So 475 is the ID number for our new grade scale that we want to switch everything to. Of course, that will be really important. So we're going to go to Special Functions, Importing and Exporting, and then the Data Export Manager. Now, access within the Data Export Manager is controlled through data access roles. So you would have to make sure you have the proper permissions through your roles to be able to either see and view the appropriate list of tables that we need, and also you would need edit capability if you want to be able to do the mass change. So just be aware that if you watch me do this and then you go to your own server and you don't see the same options or you don't have the button to mass change data, I can almost guarantee it's going to be an issue with permissions. So one of the things I'm going to do here is, instead of choosing tables like the standard table, I want to go to PowerSchool Data Sets, because we have a special data set for standards district list. And one of the reasons it's a data set and we're not just accessing the table directly is because of this item right here, primary courses. So the list of courses that are associated with a particular standard, as we saw in my SLA.1 example, there were about 6 or 7 different English courses tied to that particular standard. Those are all kept individually in another table. So one of the things the dataset does for us, it gives us a way to just export a comma-separated list of those course numbers without having to directly try and get the file right or the data right in that separate related table. So it really helps streamline and make this easier to do. So I'm just going to select everything for now. We could be picky and choosy, say, I don't need the subject area. We're not going to do anything with the conversion scale, just the grade scale ID. So we might turn a few things off, but there you go. So then when we click Next, now we can start applying our filter and saying, well, I know the identifier is going to contain SLA dot. So when we click on Show Records, we have 10 standards out of 6,200. And if we take a quick look here in the identifier column, there's SLA.1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like we have 2 SLA.5s. Notice the difference right here is the year ID. So it's good to remember that when we are looking at the data in the Data Export Manager, we're looking at everything in that table. So we probably want to also add a year ID equals 27, because standards are now school year specific. So we don't want to accidentally affect past or potentially future standards if we've already set up next year, and we just want to impact the current year. So now we have 5 out of 6207, and we simply have that SLA.1 through .5. If I wanted the parent standard, I could probably take off the dot, and that would probably be enough, there we go, to get 6 to capture that parent standard, which is just SLA all by itself. There it is. Or if we only wanted the children, we could add that dot as part of our search, as you saw me do, to get just the child standards. So I'm going to go with all 6. We can see the current grade scale ID is 259. If we went back to our list of grade scales, we could look and see what's 259. But we know we want to change them to 475. So just to kind of bring the two up side by side, let's go back to our list of grade scales. We'll sort. So 259 is the standard rubric EMAB, and we're going to change that to 1, 2, 3, 4, which is 475. Now, this is a pretty dramatic change, going from an alphanumeric to a numeric. So this is the kind of thing you would want to do between school years, and we actually would want to be setting, okay, we're making a change next school year. We could be doing this change now, affecting year 28, the 18-19 school year, and start prepping some of this data ahead of time. But this is the kind of change that if you can avoid it at all, you wouldn't want to make during the school year, because that means your teachers are going to have a grade book full of scores that are no longer valid, because obviously EMAB is not 1 through 4. So just keep that in mind when you make changes like this to your standards. So there's a new grade scale that we want, 475. So you have the button right here to edit all filtered records. When we click on that, a little drawer will open up, and we can now change any one field that's in our results list. So the more fields we selected in step 1, the more fields that will show up here to be able to be mass modified. And of course, we want to change the grade scale item DCID to 475. So when I click submit, it's done lightning fast. There you go. And we just updated all of the grade scale items just like that. So again, if this were a much larger batch of standards, you can see how much faster and efficient that would be than going in and clicking one at a time with the drawer per standard and scrolling down, going down the list of grade scales in the drop-down menu. That would get pretty tedious pretty fast. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to cover this topic this week, is just to show things like that. Now, another thing we can do that's kind of interesting is when we look at the list of classes. So we saw, again, there's that list of English courses that all of the standard is, these standards are associated with. What if we wanted to modify that? Well, we could do that as well. In fact, one of the things we can do is we could say edit the records and replace the primary courses with blank. So if we wanted to remove all of the courses from these 6 standards, we're going to take SLA and reassign it to just a handful of classes. I'm going to cancel, or maybe a subset of these courses. So I can come in and either try and select from here, or if that's kind of tough, I might need to go back to the standard page itself so I could highlight that comma-separated list. So we'll go back to district setup, back to standards, list standards, filter to SLA to find it really quick. Or kind of quick. Not sure what happened there. SLA dot. There we go. And now we've got that comma separated list. So let's say, for example, we wanted to remove the 1000 level courses here. So we could take that one out and take that one out. Select all and copy. Going to go back to my tab with the Data Export Manager. Edit all filtered records. Change the list of primary courses to this new list. We can make that larger if we want to make sure we're able to see everything. And click submit. This will take a moment longer than the other one, but not very long, because it has to go update all the records in the related standard courses table. And now if we go back course, we don't want to save that. If we click on any of these, we'll see that's been updated. And those 1,000 level courses are now gone from the Senior Language Arts. So you can really use that Data Export Manager to your advantage to mass change, to mass remove data. If you want to inactivate or deactivate a whole bunch of standards, same idea. We have our 6 selected that we want to alter. Just go to the is active, don't check the box, and we're going to set them, if I were to click submit right now, we would set all of them to being inactive or set them to active, right? Either way. So even though you can do one at a time, you can see how you could quickly change the active flag, come back, change the grade scale, come back, change the primary courses. It's not that big a deal because you're able to change all of them so quickly. They have to come back and do one field at a time. And that's all a little bit safer too. Than being able to say, hey, change these 3 things, click submit, and then realize, oops, I didn't want that 3rd item to be changed. So just be careful that you don't do things like change the year ID. Since these get copied from year to year, you would end up with duplicate standards, which would be bad because you need to have a unique identifier in each year, etc. So you want to be careful, just like you would with DDA, to be careful when you're mass changing data. And of course, we are in the Data Export Manager, so if we wanted to go to the next step and actually export our data, we could do that as well. And then a relatively new feature, I think I highlighted this in an earlier episode of The Insider. This is a button within the Data Export Manager. If I click that, that will actually export. In a data set, it's not going to do it like it would with a table. But in a table, it would give me essentially an import template with all of the column headings and descriptions from the data dictionary already in there. So that's kind of cool too when you want to import data. Now, one other way you could use this, you might have noticed there's a built-in filter where we can search on course number. So let me clear all the filters. And let's just say that I want to affect some 4th grade EL 402, which I happen to know is 4th grade math. We could just say, okay, by course, show me the standards that are associated with EL 402 and use that as a starting point for our filter. So now you can see we're going to get 112 standards that are all associated with 4th grade math. And part of that's because the training database has both sort of some locally created Apple Growth standards, and we also have the Common Core standards loaded. So we get a lot in our results because of that. But of course, in addition to the course or courses you select, you could still come in and filter by year ID, which would be just as important to make sure you're only looking at a single year. And of course, by any other field that you chose in step 1 up above. So if you only choose 3 fields here, that's all you're going to be able to search and filter on and mass change. So that's why it's a good idea to select everything or just about everything. Gives you more flexibility in searching and in mass changing. So that's the Data Export Manager and how that can save you a lot of time as a data viewing and mass modification tool, not even as an exporting tool. So let's go back to our other tab. So just want to point out one last time, make sure it's really clear, the conversion scale, it's required, it can't be left blank. But if you're no longer using the PowerTeacher Gradebook, then it's not really going to matter what you set there. Just as I said earlier, as long as you select something. And really what matters most is the grade scale for PowerTeacher Pro that you're selecting right here. Don't forget that if you don't check this box, it's not going to show up in the gradebook for teachers. So only standards that are marked to be scored by teachers will show up in PowerTeacher Pro for them to see. And if you want that standard to collect both a score and a comment, then you can go ahead and check the include comments box. Or if you do comments without scoring, then it would become a comment-only standard. One other quick and easy way of kind of seeing standards as they relate to courses, we've talked about this before, but I'll just recover it real quickly here. If you go to the course list for the district, and we'll just go to EL 501 again as an example, this district standards tab will give you a list of all the standards that are currently associated with that class. So as we scroll down, here's our 5.LA. You can see there's a series of high-level standards below that for reading of literature and informational text, foundational skills, writing, and each of those has a large number of child standards below that. So again, a lot of standards for this class, probably an unrealistic number, I would say. But anyway, here are our nice, simple Apple Grove standards once we move beyond Common Core. But this screen is a great way of just seeing, oh my gosh, we have over 100, of seeing all the standards that are associated with a particular class without having to sign in as a teacher, for example, to see what that looks like. Although that can often be an interesting way of looking at things as well. So if we were to go back to a school, go to our teacher schedules, and then go to Power Teacher Pro, as an admin, of course, we would see what the gradebook looks like if we wanted to verify. Usually the progress standards is one of the better screens for seeing that list of standards. So let's see if we can find a teacher that has an English class. There's English 2100. That should still have those SLA standards that we modified. So again, if you go to progress and standards, what is going on? We should have more than that. Let's just double check. Nope, just one. Maybe I overdid it. Let's see. Try a few more classes here. All right, Michael Abrams should be good. There we go. So again, the progress standard screen is a good one for viewing your standards because it is a vertical list. You can still sort and search and filter through there. But this would just be another way to kind of verify that if we thought we made a change, we removed some standards, we could either use that district list under courses or come into the class itself and see what's actually showing up in the teacher's gradebook once we make that change. So that's kind of a quick run through of some of the different things that pertain to configuring and setting up standards, some of the mass change capabilities that will help you in your management of the standards. Could probably do 3-hour-long shows just on standards and standards-based grading and all the pieces that go together. But hopefully that's at least a helpful starting point about some of the critical pieces that go together, where you find them, and how to leverage some of those tools that we're talking about. Just make sure there's nothing else critical here. So again, manage next year would let you sort of, if we created the 18-19 school year, then we could go ahead and push our standards forward to next school year early. That's about it. I guess I'll just talk about custom list real quick if you've not used this. When we do the list standards, we get that nice hierarchical list. But the custom list shows us standards in a table view, kind of like what we are seeing in the data export manager. And it is dependent on those custom settings. So right now, you can see it says no standards were found based on the custom list settings. So I could click there to go to edit them, or just go back so you can see this is the menu where you would go in and be able to actually change those settings. So we had $, which means contains. So we were looking for standards that contain W117 and have a name of respects adults. So let's get rid of all of that. And you can see that basically you can apply all the different kinds of filters in a bit of a cleaner, easier way than we do in the data export manager to say exactly what standards would you like to find. And then when you view the table of standards, what data do you want in the table? So if it's important to see if it's active or not, what courses it's tied to, maybe the full description, sort order, etc. You could decide to include as much or as little information as you would like. We want to see if it's set to be scored or not. And when you submit, it will save your settings and take you right to the list. So again, this interface also uses the table grid, which means we have the ability to do a basic filter that just searches on text in any row of the table. So if I were looking for, let's see if we just have anything with fun in it. Oh, well, we got functions. So I got 26 standards because of the word functions. There's no fun in standards. What can I tell you? But because of in addition to the basic filter, we have the table grid, you can also click the plus sign and start searching very specifically on any of the data that you've included. So again, maybe I should have included year ID, although I think in this case it's auto-filtered to the current year. I don't even think that's something we can define. Yep, just confirming that. So year ID is just done automatically based on the term that we're in. So once again, I'll submit, which will take me back to the table. But everything else you could search on. So if, again, you wanted to search by course, where we're going to find in English 2100, or if you want to do another quick filter, find all those that are not active. So you can look and see, do we have any inactive standards? If so, then we can go ahead and activate them. So when you get your list, you can go ahead and click. You'll get the same drawer if you want to make a modification to that standard, and then move on to the next one. So it's just sometimes a better view than the hierarchy to be able to come in and see the table with all the columns. Because in the standard list view, you really just have the identifier and the name. You might not have all the data you're looking for, and that takes a lot of clicking to click into each standard on the other screen to be able to see those kinds of details. So kind of two tools for every situation. Sometimes you just want to look and see the standard, what it is, and then look at the details. But if you're trying to see the details for a large batch of standards, that's going to be really, really slow, constantly opening and closing the drawer. And that's where the custom list will be a big time saver and give you a better, more efficient way of viewing your standards data. Especially if I zoom out a little bit so the rows, there we go, are a little bit smaller. You can see a lot of data all at once with that list view. So don't forget about the custom standard list. That will save you time as well.